The electric fire glowed dull in the brilliant sunshine. It had been switched on when Catherine arrived, and its dim red had not yet taken the chill off the air. Catherine felt tired and cold. It was only 9 o'clock. The dentist entered silently, smiled, breathing an antiseptic welcome. "Will you come now, Miss Lovegrove? Pleasant morning, isn't it?" She smiled stiffly, her face numb. The dentist seemed to be looking forward to his task. "You've had nothing? Quite correct. You'll find gas much more pleasant, Miss Lovegrove. Much more pleasant. Just relax. That's it." As he had promised, she felt nothing. She woke to the taste of scent in her mouth and was surprised to find herself spewing pink mouthwash. The dentist's voice was gentle, like the hiss of the gas. "Rinse well, Miss Lovegrove. Not so very bad, was it now?" "No," she spoke awkwardly, spilling blood and pink water. "Spit now," urged the dentist. She spat. He bowed her out with antiseptic heartiness. "Just keep your mouth well covered, Miss Lovegrove, and try not to probe the cavity with your tongue. Yes, I know, a great temptation, but try to keep off. You'll be all right now, Miss Lovegrove?" "Yes, thanks." Her voice was muffled in her striped wool scarf. When she got outside, she spat a red gob into the gutter. She still felt a little dizzy. The wind blew and the sun was silver. The roads were dappled with snow, but there was a bright mildness in the air. At the corner of the street she met the priest, with his spectacles, his black hat, and his artificial hand. He stopped to talk, having visited her through the week. "Good morning, Miss Lovegrove. You've been to the dentist, I see." "Yes, Father." "How many?" He could not resist the question. "2, with gas." She wanted to spit, but swallowed instead. "Ah, yes. Well, my child, you must hurry home and not stand here talking. Cold is a dangerous thing, you know." She left him, hating him for having made her stop and swallow. Her mouth was stiff, but not sore. She thought of the fire at home, banked with 2 briquettes, and she thought of the unwashed dishes. She came to a road which branched off downhill, beginning with cottages and ending between hedges. And the sun, the wind, and the spring washed away her sense of duty. She wanted to explore, to walk, not as a paid companion to her invalid aunt, but as an individual with life in her. 10 days of her aunt, 10 days of toothache. They were the same thing. She set off down the road with a feeling that she could walk and walk forever. And yet she was tired and her head seemed to be swimming. There was pink gravel underfoot, with an odd glaring patch of snow at the roadside. The hedges were electric with life, tight pink buds swelling on the hawthorn twigs. There were cows in the field, licking the stiff, short grass with mournful tongues. Catherine smiled and shifted her scarf a little. The wool was damp at her lips. When the fields flattened out again, there was a cottage and a bridge. Catherine passed the cottage for the greater delight of leaning on grey stone to watch a stream. The little river was broad with spring floods and rushed by with a crest of cream froth. The edges lapped more gently against a crust of snow, melting grey-white like candle grease. A twinge of pain shot through her mouth, and her tongue touched the jellied gap. 2 teeth together. It was a big space. She turned back, half tired, half dizzy again. And now she had time again to see the cottage. It was whitewashed and low, insignificant beside the incredible amount of ramshackle outhouses all round it. At the hedge, just beyond the gate, a short, rheumatic little man was poking around in the ditch. He turned around, and his pipe sent a cloud of almost royal blue smoke ripping away on the wind.
Morning.
Oh, good morning, mumbled Catherine.
You been to the dentist?
She nodded.
You're Guy White looking,
he said, peering at her.
Have you far to go?
Into town.
Well,
I wanted to go for a walk. I felt all right when I was going home, and I wanted to get into the fresh air.
Aye.
She turned away to spit. I think I'd better be going. My aunt will be waiting.
Aye?
Yes. I'm her companion. I don't like her very much, though. She'll be annoyed at me for being away so long. She liked this old man and wanted to tell him all about the annoyances of her life. He pushed back his cap and peered at her again.
You'd better come in and have some tea. It'll do you good.
The cottage was clean, but smelt earthy, like the old man himself. He was awkward in the house, taking tea out of what seemed to be a flower pot on the mantelshelf and spurting water from the shiny kettle. Do you live by yourself? Asked Catherine.
No, the wife's away uptown for the pension.
Oh, I see. She took the tea out of a pretty blue cup that had been imperfectly rinsed under the tap. She did not want to offend the old man, and the tea was refreshing. She felt again that she was strong and ready for anything. A strange idea came to her. She would leave her aunt and just walk away. There would always be people ready to feed her, ready to give her odd cups of tea. Even if that made her a tramp, well, time enough to think of that when winter came. Then she roused herself from the dark brown dream of the old man's kitchen. Of course she must go back, but not just yet. The man was watching her.
Would you like to see my dulcimers?
Dulcimers? She said lazily.
Aye, I make them.
He led her through a door at the back of the kitchen into one of the outhouses. Green, damp growths sprouted from the earth floor, and a pleasant, mouldy smell came from the old earthenware pots and broken garden furniture. Where's your dulcimers? Asked Catherine.
Here.
He hauled a huge box from under the table and opened it. He raised the lid and lifted out an assortment of triangular flat things which seemed to be made out of orange boxes, studded with brass-headed nails and laced about with some kind of horsehair stuff.
The earlier ones are a bit off tune. Aye, it's hard to get them right. Would you like a tune?
Well,
I'll play Rock of Ages.
He strummed and rattled away, and the strings whined and twanged tonelessly. The rhythm wasn't right either, but Catherine nodded and said it was very nice. He played several tunes after this, and the draught ruffled the leaves of the potted plants and stirred the loose mould on the table. Catherine wished he would stop. She wanted to giggle, and she wanted to spit. At last the man packed away his dulcimers, sighed happily, and looked at the cobwebs curtaining the edges of the sunbeam.
Well, I'll need to get back to my work.
He shifted his cap and looked at her for permission. She moved towards the door and walked along the path, which was steaming like hot bread. The old man, without a word, went to the ditch and started his task again, plunging something among the tangled weeds. "What are you doing?" she asked.
"Cleaning the ditch."
He lifted out a kind of scoop filled with mud and leaves and stones and waxy snow. "Is that your job?" she asked.
"Aye, that and seeing to the hedges. I'm a hedger and ditcher."
"Oh." Catherine watched him raking and scooping. She wanted to watch him all day. Pulling her scarf down a little, for it was chafing her chin, she did her best to keep the conversation going a little longer. "What's that big house by the river?" The wind carried a smell of earth and tobacco from him as he answered.
"Yonder. Yon's the asylum."
"Eh?"
"Aye. You new here?"
"Yes, I've been here just over a week."
"Aye. Well, that's the asylum. A fine place.
She was feeling very much better now and ventured to joke a little. You seem to know all about it.
Aye.
He stirred the rubbish from the ditch with his foot.
I used to live there.
Working there?
No, living there. In the madhouse.
He braced his stiff shoulders, and pride straightened his spine. You were discharged, though?
Aye. Discharged. Incurable.
Catherine's inquisitive tongue rambled on.
But that's how I got this job. All them as are discharged, incurable, get a job as a hedger and ditcher. The asylum's famous for hedgers and ditchers.
Are there many?
Och, aye, it's no a good asylum for curing folk, but it turns out rare hedgers and ditchers. There's about 100 in the county.
All mad? All the hedgers and ditchers in the county are mad?
Aye.
But why?
Because the asylum cannae cure them.
But you're not mad, said Catherine, not knowing whether she believed it or not.
Have it your own way, said the old fellow magnanimously. But wait till next summer. You'll see.
She muffled her mouth, but listened, curious.
It's a conspiracy. We're going to grow thistles in the ditches.
Thistles? Said Catherine. She did not want to stay much longer, but she had to find out this mystery.
Aye. We're going to plant thistles as thick as hedges. Then we'll cut down the old hedges and put ditches in their place. Oh, I'm telling you, it's a great plan. Every hedger and ditcher in the county's onto it. And when that's over...
What? She said. His voice was fading.
That's over.
It was queerly loud and reassuring, close to her ear. The cold spring landscape cracked across, all but the patch of snow at the ditch, which stayed like fluffed cotton wool. It was cotton wool. She wiped her lips with it.
That's over, said the dentist. Not too bad, was it?
I was dreaming, she said awkwardly, rinsing her mouth with pink mouthwash. I thought I had gone and was walking down a road.
The dentist smiled indulgently. Yes, that must have been the gas. Not so very bad, was it now? Just spit, Miss Lovegrove.
She spat. She wrapped herself up and tried to curb her morbidly exploring tongue. Outside, she spat a red gob into the gutter. The wind blew and the sun was silver. The roads were dappled with snow. At the corner of the street, she met the priest, with his spectacles, his black hat, and his artificial hand.
The horse walked under the great beeches, lazily padding by the side of the road. Now and again he stopped to graze, his white head cropping the grass, his tail sweeping the flies away in slow, rhythmic switches. Always, after he had eaten, he went on again in the same direction, along the road which led to his stable. The knight sat with his head drooping, one hand listless on the reins. The wound in his stomach had almost stopped bleeding now, but he could feel its edges pouting like a red mouth. There was no pain, no sensation, but his face was pinched with past agony, the lips and eyes blue-shadowed. At last, so quietly, so easily that he hardly realized it, he leaned farther forward, drooped sideways, and slid to the ground. His horse gazed at him sadly, mildly, and went on. Now he lay under a green hedge with the grasses sweeping his face, and a nettle grinning at him with green teeth. The sky darkened and spun as the pain returned, and his face grew cold in the sunshine. The horse went on under the beeches, his silken ornaments tawdry and draggled. There was no one to stop him, to question or harass him with further journeyings and loud frightened cries. The castle gate swung open, wide and untended, and unseen he padded the dusty path and stopped to graze where the grass was greenest. They had left the castle 2 days ago, when they heard that the enemy were coming. A shrill scream had run over the countryside, a cry of alarm, and the women had listened with pale faces. "The enemy! The enemy! Our men are fighting, but they cannot hold them. Give them the castle, give them our homes, our riches, our land. It is easier to part with these than with our honour." They filled their hands, they grabbed what they could, and in an hour the stables were emptied, and the lady of the castle headed the retreat, her robes flowing, her hands grasping the reins like a man's, beating out the words, "Oh, hurry, hurry!" The castle was deserted, inside and out. The battlements jutted sharp into the sky, the flag drooped on its pole. In the kitchen, a yellow dog whined and stretched itself before the hearth. The big black pot was bedded in ashes, and the soup inside had turned sour, a rancid scum mottling the surface, a thin dust sifted over it from the shifting of the fire. The dog was thirsty. The vermin which trespassed at night had kept him from hunger, but there was no water anywhere. Yawning, his eyes dull, he stretched himself and set off on another search. Quietly, patiently, he pattered out, his claws scratching bluntly, his head poked forward in the dust of the passages. Even the cat had gone. He pushed against a door which stood ajar, and found himself in the high dining hall. From habit, he went to his old corner beside the hearth, where he would wait for his master to throw him the bones and scraps from his plate. Head erect, ears cocked, he waited, but there was no one in the high chair. No sound of laughter, no red faces flaming over the wine flagon. He sighed, and his ears drooped, and his tail went limp between his legs. Up the stairs he went, round and round, up and up, like a dog on a treadmill. Here there were rooms which told the story of flight. He poked his head into every one, but backed out again, timid, defeated. In the last room, the largest, something was stirring, a flurry of sound, a soft, metallic jingle. He tiptoed in, whimpering. A velvet gown was thrown on the floor with satin slippers and a box of bright silks. The couch where my lady had lain was all in disorder, and her brushes lay askew on the table. On a perch by the window, a goshawk rustled its striped feathers and stamped angrily, trying to jerk itself free. It looked at the dog, and the dog leaped forward, yelping and panting and wagging his tail frantically. The bird sat still, quieted for the moment. The velvet on the floor was ruffled under the dog's feet, and the slippers and trinkets were scattered as he pranced in joy. Yap, yap, he went, and the noise of his breathing filled the pauses between his barks. The bird's head crouched lower and lower, till at last it lunged forward with its wings raised and its beak hooked and vicious. It stabbed twice, and the dog rolled back in dismay, still yelping and hurt at the unexpected hostility. Once again he tripped up to the perch, his eyes pleading, but the goshawk glared and beat at him, rattling its fine silver chain, so that he retreated, howling, down the stone stairs to the quiet and the loneliness. The white horse stood before his stables in his torn trappings. Inside was food and shade from the sun, but the door was shut, and no friendly hand came to open it. Everything was dusty and dry, no water anywhere. The fountain in the yard had stopped playing long ago, and though one of the pipes still trickled, it left only a thick smear of slime oozing over the stone basin. The horse snuffed at it and turned away. Up in the tower, the goshawk stared coldly at the tumbled finery of my lady's boudoir, and wrenched afresh at its chain. The The knight lay with his knees drawn up to ease the gash in his stomach. His mouth was dry, and though he could feel the stones sharp under him, he had no strength to move. He could not even lift a hand to wipe the dust from his face. Where was he? The world was all out of focus. There was a rustle of leaves over his head, and grasses waved round him, tickling his ears with their feathery tips. The sky was a deep blue, shading off pale towards the horizon. Against the blueness the leaves overhead were black, and the grass in which he lay was colourless. It must be night. There was no wind, and yet the beech leaves, infinitely more remote than the sky, rustled and trembled miles up in space. The nettle, which had grinned in daylight, now stood like a spiky sentinel, every leaf rigid and strong. It was too virile, too tense among the delicate grasses. He looked back to the sky, from the farthest turquoise edge to the deep azure above, and then he turned his head and saw the battlemented edge of his castle against the deepest blue of all, and the world swung into focus so suddenly that it dizzied him, and he clung to the ground for safety, forgetting that he could not fall. His home was just beyond the opposite hedge. A little farther on were the gates, and then the drive curving back in shadow till it reached the castle. His horse must have gone on alone. Why then had nobody come to help him? Perhaps they had not guessed he could be so near. Perhaps the horse had gone back to his stable unseen. They were often idle, these hostlers, and knowing their master to be away, they would be neglecting their duties. Well, any time now, they would come for him. With an effort he dug his hands into the grass and levered himself higher, leaning against the bank. Strange how weak his arms were. He felt the wound drag its crusted edges, and drew up his legs again. Now he could watch the tower, and wait for them coming. They would bring lights, and a litter to carry him home. They would have water, and the unguents to salve his wound, wine for his parched throat, and soft linen to lie on. And his lady would weep over him, but smile because he had returned to her. It was very quiet, as still as death. No voices carried from the castle, no lights winked from the windows. An owl swept past like a shadow, and a faint glitter of stars was washed up on the deepening tide of blue. Next time he woke, he thought that day had come. The sky had lightened, and the moon was so bright that he could see everything, the stones in the road, the blood on his clothes, and the colour of the bluebells in the grass, pale beside the crimson of clover. The dead white light poured down, and he was suddenly afraid. Why did they not come? Did his lady not feel? Did she not sense that he was here? He turned his head restlessly, but he could not move himself more. It was like lying in a nightmare, pressed down by the knotted covers and the weight of sleep. His head was giddy with too much moonlight. Perhaps he was sleeping now. He would be better in the morning. The dream would pass, and he would rise up rested and walk into the great hall, and they would flock to welcome him, and she would nurse him back to his old strength. He started. His dog, his little yellow dog, was howling far away. It lifted its head and howled at the moon, a long bay dying away in sorrow. The night was weak, and the sound made the sweat start all over his body. "Hey, Jacko," he tried to call, but the voice stuck in his throat, and his lips were too dry to whistle. When the howling had died away, he watched the tower, ready for all manner of curses to fall in it, witches skimming the coping like bats, flames leaping red from the stone. But the moon shone steady and pale, and nothing moved, not even the dust. He opened his eyes again, not knowing that he had slept. His head was heavy, and the whole world pressing down on him, and his mouth was dry, burned up with fever. The sky was grey, the grasses moist and fresh, and the castle seemed far away now, happed in a white mist. It was cold, so cold that there was hardly any sense in his limbs. It took him a long time to think, to remember who and where he was, and why he was lying in damp grass with nothing to moisten his lips or slake his throat. His mind went wandering in circles, like the bird which hovered above him, round and round, never settling, but never leaving the one spot. He started when it alighted beside him, pleased at its nearness, the tameness which let it stand unafraid. Idly he watched its eyes, its strong beak, and barred feathers. It was a beautiful bird. His mind was so slow that at first the chain on its leg meant nothing to him. It was a delicate chain, broken off raggedly, and round the leg was a silver ring, the coat of arms graven finely, so that it stood out clear for all it was so minute. When at last the meaning seeped into him, a faint flush of warmth ran into his body. Strength came back to his hands, and his fingers fretted and tore at the torn silk of his cloak, but all he could wrench off was one thread. He held out his arm, and the bird came nearer, as it was used to do when he called. Fumbling with weakness, he looped the stuff inside the looseness of the ring till the bird protested and flapped its wings. It was done, though. It was accomplished. Now, as it had been taught, it would fly to its mistress, and soon. It would not move. Sinister, it raked its beak along its claws, and ruffled its soft feathers. Its eyes were cold, but expectant. And suddenly the knight knew that there was no one for it to fly to, and that it would watch beside him now till the last. Beyond that, he did not care to think.
Mrs. Funny unlocked the hall door, climbed the damp steps, and struck a match. The windows were permanently blacked out, and the air smelt of gas and tea meetings. There was an hour to spare before the communal brethren came in, but Mrs. Funny, who was the hall caretaker, did not believe in wasting time. After lighting the wheezing mantles and the gas fire, she went into the kitchen, filled the urn, and came back with a duster which had once been Mr. Funny's singlet. She was a careful worker. She dusted the forms all over, reading the inscriptions on the back. Some, in scarlet, cried, "Repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." Others, in sickly blue, said that God was love, and were contradicted by faded yellow texts insisting that he was a jealous God. At first, Mrs. Funny had laughed at these crude ejaculations. Now they disturbed her. Not being a converted member of the communal brethren, she was under no obligation to believe, but now and again she found herself wondering if there wasn't something in it. She had got the caretaker's job through her husband, who was a leading light at meetings, and as he'd been out of work for most of his married life, she could not afford to turn down the money. It gave her something to do, Mr. Funny said, and his wife, a little bitterly perhaps, agreed. Her evenings had drifted into one long night of prayers and buns and pennies for the gas, and her afternoons into long, dull sessions of cleaning up. 5 minutes before the earliest comer could be expected, she had finished her work and retired to the kitchen. From there she could hear old Jenny Mowbray panting up the stair, trailing her reluctant granddaughter, who would have preferred to be at home playing Peaver on the stairhead. Mr. Farrell the coalman came next, sitting down humbly, and then the rest arrived in 2s and 3s. Mr. Funny alone, as husband of the caretaker, strolled into the kitchen, fingered the halfpenny buns and strolled out again. From the way in which he kept turning over the money in his pockets, Mrs. Funny guessed that he had something on his mind. Perhaps he was going to speak. Mrs. Funny often wondered if the urge would ever come upon her. She hoped not. Outside, Glasgow dripped and drizzled. The communal brethren had turned out in old coats and waterproofs, and half the forms were filled with sad, wet people looking over hymn books and talking in whispers. Every time the door opened, a fog came in from the river, and an acrid, kippery smell from the fish curers in Thistle Street. Mrs. Funny wondered what brought people out to these meetings. For herself, she would have given anything to be in her own house, able to spend the evening as she liked. But apart from the money, there was her husband. He would not hear of her giving up the brethren. Well, much as she hated his fanaticism, it was better than having a man who drank or gambled or hung around the corners with the Beehive gang. There was no set programme for the meeting. As many as could joined in with impromptu prayers, sermons and solos. Funny did so frequently, and Jack Garrity could be relied on to keep things going. Every man had his own special theme. Jack Garrity's was preparedness. He was going to talk tonight. After the first hymn, he mounted onto the little platform beside the harmonium. Mrs. Funny looked around, hoping to see some job to be done. She did not want to hear that throaty voice give warning of her doom. She laughed at it, but it frightened her. They never gave this sort of sermon in church, but who was to know that the church was not purposely blinding people to their fate? Mr. Garrity said it was anyway, and he seemed pretty sure of himself. There was nothing to be done. Mrs. Funny tiptoed into the back form. Behold, I was shapen in wickedness, and watched Miss Mellis furtively pumping air into the harmonium. Jack Garrity made several important-looking notes, shifted the Bible on the table, looked to heaven, and cleared his throat. The audience settled down more comfortably in a smell of damp clothes and soap. They liked Jack Garrity's sermons. According to Mr. Garrity, the Lord might come at any time, therefore you must be prepared. Not to be prepared was the worst sin possible, and as God presumably watched like a cat at a mouse hole, ready for the unwary, it was your own fault if you were caught out. Being a sporting man, Mr. Garrity made the whole thing into a ghastly celestial game. Thus, if the Lord came for you and you were engaged in prayer, you scored 3 points. If you were working, 2. If doing nothing definitely wrong, 1. And if frankly engaged in sin, Mr. Garrity's rather coarse mind painted scarlet pictures of the future. He urged the communal brethren to prepare for the terrible advent, it might come any time now, by all sorts of inconvenient tests. They had to stop at odd moments of the day and night and calculate the amount of points they deserved. Mrs. Funny, trying this out by way of a joke, was depressed to learn that she averaged very few. She had never yet been engaged in prayer, and quite often her acts had been definitely carnal, eating or drinking, or having a nice sit-down before washing up the dinner dishes. "Friends," Jack Garrity roared, mopping his brow with a grey-coloured handkerchief, "think on all you've done since you got up this morning. Now, take breakfast, for example. Aye, like enough you ate your breakfast and read the paper. And what did you read, huh? What was it caught your eye on the headlines? War, battle, meat ration at 1 and 2. And none of you thought about the blessed news waiting in the Bible, calling out to be read by every one of you. Ah, my friends, you may talk about bombs. You may talk about planes. You may talk about invasion. But what good will that do you when the Lord cometh? Behold, saith the Lord, I come not with tanks, but with judgment. And God help you all, said Mr. Garrity piously, if he finds you playing darts at the warden's post instead of preparing to meet your end. Oh, this was popular stuff. When the speaker sat down and buried his nose somewhere about Nehemiah, the audience wriggled in morbid approval. Mrs. Funny, slipping out to see to the urn, was glad it would soon be time to hand round the buns. She filled the tea bag, left it in the boiling water to infuse, and heard the rumble and shuffle which showed that the communal brethren were ready for refreshment. Mr. Garrity, when he dropped his prophetic manner, was an insignificant, bald-headed man with broken teeth. Rather repulsive, Mrs. Funny thought, but quite a rogue in his own way. Sometimes he brought his cup to the back of the hall and carried on a conversation with the caretaker. Mrs. Funny did not like his jokes. She was a big, broad woman, very clean in her print overall, and Garrity, being no chicken, liked to pass the time of day with her, as he called it. Tonight, Mr. Garrity was otherwise engaged. Mr. Funny came into the kitchen and fingered the buns again. His wife watched him in nervous disapproval. His hands weren't very clean. Hers were wrinkled and pink with too much scrubbing.
"Going to speak tonight, Will?"
she asked. "No." His face was dour and angry.
"How no?"
"Och, yon Garrity's no finished yet. The spirits moved him to convert somebody the nicht, and he'll go on till he does it."
"Oh, what about you? Can you no tell him the spirit says you've to get your spoke in as well as him?"
Mr. Funny looked pious.
"No, if Garrity feels the call, he must obey."
Then Mrs. Funny said a dreadful thing.
"Oh, I bet the spirit doesn't move on of you. You'll just like to show off."
She waited for an angry rebuke, but it did not come. Instead, her husband bowed his head. She saw his lips move, praying for her. "Let her see thy blinding light and thy fire of judgment, O Lord."
"Oh, if you don't stop that daft carry on, Will Funny," she threatened, "I'll finish up here once and for all. Now mind, I'm telling you, you'll no convert me. Here, give me a hand with these cups."
The communal brethren ate slowly, making a meal of every mouthful. At home, no doubt, they gorged and guzzled and crammed their mouths too full, but here the buns were small and inadequate to fill hungry stomachs. Mrs. Funny, sipping at the hall door, felt hatred of the bent backs, hunched shoulders and nodding heads. When she gathered in the cups, she snatched some of them from old fingers which clutched too tightly. They had a hymn next, each verse ending on an unnecessary and lugubrious Alleluia. Then Garrity got up to speak, still sucking crumbs out of his teeth. There was no warning sounded in Glasgow that night. Glasgow officially was not raided. Only one plane, isolated and pursued, went over, so high that none heard the broken beat-beat of its German accent. It dropped its cargo before it reached the city and reserved, for no reason at all, a single incendiary for the drab dock area. Jack Garrity was doing well. The communal brethren liked powerful speakers, and Jack was laying off, pounding the Bible and perspiring. "Friends, prepare yourselves," he rasped. "Death comes to us all, and when the time cometh, what then? Then you will not bother with the social side of death. It matters not that the cooperative bury you deeper and cheaper than Boone and McQuarrell. Dividend and brass handles will avail you nothing when you go before the Lord, and the recording angel reads out of the book, and the Lord shall consign you to hell, to burn and burn eternally. Eternal judgment, eternal fire, the fire of..." The room was full of smoke and glare. 2 of the gas mantles were hanging raggedly. There was plaster everywhere, and a form had caught alight. Mrs. Funny, dazed and uplifted, saw Garrity dash for the door, followed by a frantic crowd of brethren. She believed! Oh, now she believed. She heard herself shouting, "Glory, hallelujah! The fire of the Lord!" before Mr. Funny grabbed her arm and dragged her clattering down the damp, worn steps into the street. It took the firemen 2 hours to put out the blaze, and the communal brethren, had they not run so quickly, might have heard some pointed remarks from the NFS about people who neglected to keep sand, water and a stirrup pump handy. Mrs. Funny, of course, lost her job with the hall, but when her husband was called up a few weeks later, to do some irksome tasks with the Pioneer Corps, she applied for war work. She now spends her days in a works canteen, washing dishes, sweeping up crumbs and presiding over the urn. The girls like her well enough. Old Funny Face, they call her, affectionately, and listen with suppressed giggles when she tries to convert them. She belongs to some queer religious sect. Harmless enough, probably, but rather mad. For example, there was that time she was fire-watching with Mina Graham. An incendiary dropped just at the door, and Mrs. Funny stood shouting, "Let it burn, let it burn, it is the Lord!" If it hadn't been for old Garrity, the foreman, she might have heard more about it. It was my father said to me, "Bessie, there's a man being hanged in the street, and if you're good, I'll take you." Her voice warmed as the girls leaned forward to listen. Her black hair was short to her ears, and she wore it in the plain orphanage way, strained back from her sallow face and held in place with one Kirby grip. Rain danced in the puddles, and the windows were misted with wistful breath. The scrubbed floor was a labyrinth of wet, bare footprints, as if a colony of savages had danced in the common room, and the girls sat in secretive little groups, their bare feet tucked under their pinafores. There was so little to do at the orphanage on a wet day. The schoolgirls' annuals had been read over and over again till the gaudy covers hung by a thread. The jigsaw puzzles were always scattered, and the same crowd commandeered the patients' cards. The only recreation left was snakes and ladders, and the girls had tired of that long ago. Now they fell back on conversation, and, as always, the conversation grew nostalgic, stretching back into the past, with roots which were so often rotten. Bessie Borthwick had only one tale to tell, but she could always command an audience. She never contradicted herself, never changed her way of telling it, unless she added here and there a detail to make it all more clear. The girls believed every word of it. Doubtful at first, they listened and grewed and forbore to contradict her. And afterwards, whenever they thought of Bessie Borthwick, they remembered the awful thing she had seen. "It was my father said to me, 'Bessie, there's a man being hanged in the street.'" How often had she told it? Hundreds of times, and each time she saw it more vividly, imagination brighter than memory. It was a close, still afternoon, with the sun just out and no more, shining with a dusty flatness on the houses opposite. The door and windows were open for air, but no air came in, and the big geranium on the sill sucked up what was left till there was hardly enough to breathe. Down in the square, all day, there'd been a hammering and banging, with women leaning from windows to watch, their houses neglected, their hair uncombed. Bessie did not know what the high wooden edifice was for, but she guessed it would be some kind of stage on which the day's performance would take place. Her father made her wear her Sunday dress, dark brown with a touch of lace at the collar. She took his hand and skipped along beside him. There was a murmur somewhere, like bees swarming in the heat, but there was not a soul to be seen. A queer, fiery light shone on the empty streets, and all the houses were shut up. "Where's everybody?" she asked. "You'll see," said her father, and wiped the sweat from his brow. "Come on now, hurry. We want a good place." When they came round the back of the church, the sound broke on them suddenly, as if cotton wool had been pulled from their ears. The crowd buzzed and bumbled, jammed together, but moving in itself like a swarm dazed with smoke, and scattered at the edges as people hovered about trying to find a vantage point. All the tenements around were cram-jam with heads and faces. Even the roofs were full. The only clear space was the platform itself, and even there a few boys were clambering up the struts and being knocked down again by hectoring policemen. Everyone was sweating and uneasy but hysterically eager. The women at the windows yelled to their friends on the ground, making rude, coarse jokes and screeching with laughter. Bessie's father began to nudge and edge away to the front of the crowd, a few paces at a time, so that no one could say definitely that he was moving forward. It was frightening, squashed among the big people. Bessie was suffocating in a tunnel of shifting humanity, fearful of being crushed or separated from her father, of looking up and seeing nothing but strangers. She kept her eye on his broad grey back and clutched his cuff with tight fingers. When they got to the front, right opposite the platform, people muttered resentfully, but nobody protested outright, because Bessie's father was a big man with a scowl and a heavy jaw. The sun had gone in now, and purple clouds were piling up behind the chimneys. The whole sky had darkened, and a little wind sprang up, swinging the rope on the gallows, letting everyone see the black noose hanging from the beam. The clouds moved slowly, and thin wisps of steam seemed to drift over the darkness. "Thunder," muttered the crowd, passing the word from mouth to mouth. "Thunder." When the cart came, cutting a slow way through the heads and tossing arms, those who could not see it traced its progress by the howls and catcalls and derisive cheers which followed. "Look! Look, d'ye see?" Bessie's father lifted her up on his shoulder, but the men behind growled and she had to be put down again. "We were here first, see? Got as much right as her to our places, haven't we?" All right, grumbled Mr. Borthwick, and put her down, and smoothed the clothes which had rumpled round her waist. Bessie could not see who was in the cart, but she clapped solemnly as a man was half dragged onto the platform, his brow bleeding and his arms tied behind his back. The priest was helped up, an old white-haired man with a red face, then the hangman, with a black mask as if he was dressed for Halloween. He seemed to enjoy the attention which was paid to him, and waved his hand jovially to the mob. "Daddy, what—" "Shh!" It was time. The priest had prayed inaudibly, and those who had removed their hats kept them off and mopped their brows. The prisoner stepped forward, mouthing, pleading evidently, but he could not make himself heard. Then the hangman came up with the rope, and the prisoner started at its touch, as if he had but then realised what was going to happen. "No! No!" he screamed. "No!" A great wave of laughter echoed round him as he struggled and blubbered. He had no chance. There were many hands on him, dragging him back, and his heels made long scores on the new wood. After they had put the noose on him, he stood quite still, snivelling a little. A spot or two of rain fell, and the heads turned up, diverted only for a second. Suddenly the man was swinging out over the crowd, a wild, jerking thing against the boiling sky. The men's voices were like wild beasts. "He's dead now, see?" said her father. She could not believe he was dead. It was too sudden. The wind was colder now, playing with his hair, and his legs were still jerking about like mad. His face was as murky as the sky. "I could hardly walk, I was shaking that hard," said Bessie. Still the rain held off, and still the crowd massed and roared. She began to cry and asked her father to take her away, but they had to stand still, their heads craned back, watching the dead man's eyes bulge further and further as if they were on stalks. "Bessie Borthwick, you might come to my study for a moment." All the girls jumped when the matron spoke. Bessie shook her head, half-dazed. There was the common room, the empty grate, the ragged annuals, the rain dirling and drumming long streaks on the window. "Yes, ma'am," she said. "Now, Bessie," said the matron, "I've been listening to you more than once. What was that story you were telling the girls?"
Please, ma'am, it was before I came here. My father took me to see a hanging. Really? Yes, ma'am. Oh, I don't suppose you know that people are never hanged in public nowadays. That sort of thing was stopped long before you were born. Please, ma'am, and another thing, Bessie. How long have you been at the orphanage? I think 12 years. And you're nearly 13 now. That means you were a baby when you came. She thought for a minute. Yes, ma'am. Well, how is it that you were able to walk about and do all these things before you were a year old? That's rather premature, isn't it? She stood quiet, blushing. There seemed nothing to say. The matron tapped on the desk with her keyring and smiled, not unkindly. I see you realise what a silly girl you've been. Oh, I know you're not the only one who tells stories. I hear some very strange tales when you think I'm not listening. But yours is... well, it's not a healthy kind of story, child. It's morbid to think of all these horrible things. Forget about them. Make up something else. But be sure you know you are making it up. There's no harm so long as you know yourself it's all make-believe. Now, I want you to promise never to mention that subject again. Forget all about it, will you? Put it right out of your mind. Yes, ma'am. That's right. Remembering a hanging, it's so ridiculous. Run along now and don't be silly. It was all very well to say, don't be silly. Now she thought about it, she realised that the matron had been right. She had been a baby when she came here, and yet she could remember it. She could see the man twitching as he swung and feel the hot, thundery air, the press of the crowd, and the sickness at her stomach when she saw the man's tongue thrusting from thick lips as if he were mocking her. She could remember every detail of that day, after the hanging, with the rain coming on. But it stopped there. She knew what the house was like, the dark kitchen, the scrubbed floor and the wool rugs, with the lace curtains clean but frail. She remembered her mother at the sunken doorstep, watching them go, but reluctant that the child should see such sights. She had worn a print apron and a dust cap. That was all clear, as vivid as the musty smell of the geranium. But before the hanging, and after, there was nothing. Forget all about it and don't be silly. But if she did forget, everything would be as blank as the emptiness which surrounded the one bright picture. She was afraid of the blankness, afraid of the great spaces of oblivion. The way to security was buried deep in her dream. Back in the common room, the windows were completely misted over, and another girl had taken her place in the circle. Bessie hardly heard them move up to make room for her. She was remembering something which had escaped her up till now. During the hanging, a stray dog had pushed up to her, and she had automatically fondled it. She could feel its nose cold in her hand, and the draught of its tail as it beat against her leg.
He stood at the gate, watching her. The last of the sunlight faded as she washed the window. She propped the long black brush against the wall and threw the water against the glass. When the water stopped dripping and left only black marks on the stonework, she looked up at the sky, one hand holding back her hair, her overall whipping in windy spirals. Then she lifted the pail and went round to the back of the cottage. The house stood secure against the wind, not a pane open, not a curtain flapping, but over the roof a long grey whisker of smoke wagged and vanished. His eyes caught the grey smoke and lost it in the clouds. One fire, he thought, hard up or thrifty. Up in an attic he saw her thin form clouding a window, a yellow duster hasting over the ledges and polishing the glass. The man closed the gate and went round to the back of the house. Compared with the trim stonework and the well-gravelled path he had seen, the back regions were neglected, and even poor. The worn rope mat on the step, the scrabblings of pipe clay on the flags, the tangled old washing cloths on the window looked as if they had been untouched for months. Behind the garden wall were a few fruit trees, in a group too small to be called an orchard. Above the stonework he could see the boughs heavy with apples, like round red lanterns waiting to be lit, and in the garden itself, where a tree overhung the wall, apples littered the ground ungathered. He rattled the knocker, a short staccato knock, and listened to the footsteps coming downstairs. The girl opened the door. Harassed-looking, her prettiness half hidden under dust cap and overall, she brushed back her hair and straightened her apron to neatness. The man began to speak, in a high, sibilant voice. His dress was soberly respectable, a black overcoat and a bowler hat. His hands were empty, and there was no suitcase at his feet, but he had the indescribable obsequious cheerfulness of the man with something to sell. His blue chin doubled itself over a white collar, and his large nose swelled under oval gold spectacles. "Good afternoon," he said, with a little bow. "I wonder if you have any gold to sell, any watches, rings—" "Sorry, nothing like that." Her voice cut across the hiss of his recital. "No watches, rings, lockets, brooches, bangles, no false teeth?" "No, I'm sorry." He waggled his hands ingratiatingly, then put them behind his back, bowing forward again and looking at his bright, unspecked boots. "Any brass candlesticks? Lots of you young people can't be bothered cleaning them nowadays. We give very good money for all brassware. Any brass toasting forks, watch chains, brass plaques, anything that looks like brass?" "No, nothing like that." She forced finality into her tone, but the man had his piece well rehearsed and defied all efforts to put him off. "Any brooches? Any hatpins? Any hair slides? Spectacle frames, cufflinks, pendants? Any old beads? Any—" He moved nearer, as if struck with an idea. "Any old Woolworth pearls? Or sixpenny rings? We pay good money, madam. We buy anything at all, anything usable that you might put out to salvage." "I might—" His ear caught at the phrase, and he nodded to hasten her decision. "I've got one or two odds and ends upstairs, but I don't think—" "Let me have a look at them, madam, just one glance. I won't press you to sell if you don't want to. Just let me see them. Anything you have. Any old watches, chains, beads, bangles, cutlery." His sibilant, coaxing chant followed her as she retreated. She left the door open, and he could see into the house, into the cold stone scullery edged with a smudged border of rubbing stone. It was all very neglected, out of keeping with the picture of the girl as he had first seen her, cleaning inside and out with a sort of nervous energy, as if afraid that her work would mount up and get on top of her. She was a long time coming down. The rain began to spit in cold, wet flurries. Autumn had come suddenly, with the world cold and wet, the trees strip-teasing, baring themselves slowly to the last leaf. He stepped inside the door, sheltering himself without intruding, peering abstractedly into the scullery, at the bread bin on the shelves and the wringer lying against one wall. He could hear the woman walking about upstairs, moving indecisively, straying away on wilful paths of carpeting. He stood back a step when she appeared, thrusting a glittering handful of junk at him. There was a chromium scarf pin with 2 brilliants missing, a jangling necklace of pearls without a catch. "Are these any good?" she asked, half ashamed of offering them to him, half eager for him to take them. He turned them to the light, looking them over critically.
"That's the stuff," he said. "All these things, you see. I'll give you 2 and 6.
"All right," she said doubtfully, "if you can use them."
"Oh, I can use them. I've got a market for them. There's a great demand for these things, you know. People will buy anything nowadays, anything at all, and glad to get it. Anything else in that line now? Lockets? You haven't an old locket, have you?"
"No."
"Any ornaments, paperweights, fancy buckles, rings, brooches, chains, watches, any old watches?"
"No, I'm sorry. I wonder, though, could you wait a second? I might have another old necklace or something if you waited till I had a look."
"Certainly, certainly. Anything you care to show me, anything you want to sell. Earrings, fancy clasps, fountain pens, brass pokers."
She brought down a china jug stamped with the Exhibition Lion of 1939, a crescent-shaped badge with Blackpool on it, an enamelled mug, and a gollywog brooch bought with marmalade tokens. She had in her apron pocket a necklace of shells, and an ugly little pebble brooch with a broken pin. She held them out, feigning indifference as he priced them.
4 and 6, he said.
5 shillings. He looked at her, noting that she was ready to bargain.
"Very well,"
he said willingly.
"We won't haggle over 6pence. Are you sure that's all? No old paperweights, paper knives, crockery, glassware, light shades? No vases, tin trays, bird cages, musical instruments?"
"I've a mouth organ," she said, not meaning him to take her seriously. Then, as she saw his eagerness, she spoke more earnestly. "It's been lying about for a while, but it was a good one."
"I'll look at it,"
he said. When she was away, he looked once more at the bright little knick-knacks she had given him. A few touches, and they would be unrecognisable, and almost better than new. Then he would sell them in a completely different place and gain commission on sales. It was a grand business, if you knew how to work it. Before she offered him the mouth-organ, running to him with it eagerly as a child, she polished it on her apron. The man put it to his mouth, his lips curling up as he played a few soft notes. Suddenly it struck him that he was being ridiculous, a sober old man in spectacles breathing into a mouth-organ. He laughed, and the girl laughed too, nervously, as if afraid to offend him. He jumped to business again, but now more indulgently, as with one with whom he had shared an experience.
"It's quite a good one. Worn, of course, but usable. 2 shillings?"
"It cost 8 and 6 new," she said.
"Ah, but it's not new now."
He grinned warily.
"Half a crown?"
"Well, all right," she said. "After all, well, my husband's just been called up. A soldier's pay. I thought, the little extra."
"Oh, yes, I see."
He juggled the mouth-organ up and down, throwing it up and catching it again. It was raining hard now, blowing sideways like a brown veil, and the wind tugged at the trees behind the wall. He stepped again into the shelter of the passage, and the girl stepped back uneasily, not sure whether to rebuke or condone the liberty. He felt the uncertainty of her attitude. A girl all alone in the house, and, to hide the realization, he started off on his patter again.
"If you had anything else, I could. You haven't any alarm clocks or enamel pans? No old suits or ladies' jumpers? Boots, shoes, slippers, propelling pencils?"
"No," she said. "That's all, really." He looked at her, at the pretty face dust-smudged, the hands glazed with floor polish and the handles of brushes. Suddenly he wanted to stroke her hair, to pat her shoulder, to hold her in his arms and feel the smallness of her as she struggled against him. The feeling was so strong that he had to turn away and look out at the wet garden with the apples leaning over the wall. He hummed, coughed, and turned back to her with his hands in his pockets. What he had to do was to be generous to her, to make up for the way he had swindled her. Well, not swindled exactly. He had a market for the things, she hadn't. He had paid her as much as he'd ever paid anyone, but the profit of the transaction would go to him, and he felt that somehow it ought to go back to her. It was ridiculous. He did not love the girl. He did not even know her, and his brief moment of desire had passed, but there remained the idea of being kind to her in a fatherly way. He coughed again and rattled the money in his pockets.
"Tell you what," he said, "I can't give you any more than this. It's not my money, see, and I'm not allowed to give more than a certain amount, but I thought, if you could let me have a few apples—"
"Well, I don't know," she said. "They're not mine, really. You'd have to take the Windfalls. Mr. Robertson lets me have those."
They'll do, if you could just let me have a bag or something."
"All right, you gather them and I'll see what I can do." He crossed the wet green, silver beads of rain rolling from the grass as he passed. His hands sank up to the cuffs in dank greenness. His fingers rounded the sweet smoothness of apple after apple. When he had gathered as many as he could carry, he waited at the door until the girl returned with a large bag. He felt wet and uncomfortable, and as his wet cuffs chafed at his wrists, all his feeling for her disappeared in irritation. She was too thin, too anxious-looking, and he was making a fool of himself. He counted the apples, judged the weight expertly, and gave a market price and not a penny more.
"Well,"
he said, setting his hat right, settling his coat collar,
"it's time I went on my way."
His voice seemed to wheeze.
"Any time you have anything else, any time you're spring cleaning, just put all your old jewellery, all your odds and ends aside."
"Yes," she said. "Thank you very much." He raised his hat with a flourish, waving it above his bald brow. Without the bowler, he looked like a lizard. She watched his black, rigid back disappearing down the path. His boots were still brilliant, and one ungloved hand swung soft and plump by his side. His pockets showed no sign of the glittering trash he carried. He had dropped one apple at the edge of the green. She stepped out into the rain, lifted it up, and took a bite out of it. The rain on the peel mingled with the juice in her mouth, watery sweet, and her strong white teeth chewed the fruit in crisp bites. But all the time she ate, she was thinking, not of the apple, but of the money, and her hand held on to the silver as if she would never let go.
This world is endless, so wide, so broad, but somehow I'm still lost in you. The streets are full of moving shadows, countless places I could go. City shining, people passing, yet I still feel so alone. Every road keeps leading nowhere, every sky feels cold and blue. In this world so vast and open, I'm still lost in missing you. The world is wide, so wide before me, but I keep losing my way. Somewhere in the endless distance, your memory makes me stay. The world moves on, I've tried to outrun silence, tried to leave your ghost behind, but your name still echoes softly through the corners of my mind. The world is wide, so wide before me, but I keep losing my way. Somewhere in the endless distance, your memory makes me stay. The world moves on without us, but my heart remains untrue. For no matter where these feet may wander, I'm still lost in missing you. Maybe someday I'll stop searching for your face in every crowd, but until that day, this broken heart will keep calling your name out. The world is wide, so wide before me, but I keep losing my way. Somewhere in the endless distance, your memory makes me stay. The world moves on without us, but my heart remains untrue. For no matter where these feet may wander, I'm still lost in missing you.